Hello again and welcome to the channel. My name's Annie and this is my creative detour. I hope you had a great weekend and had an opportunity to do some playing in your crafty space. And I've had a lovely weekend actually. My parents have been visiting and my mum helped me over the weekend with this project. She helped with some stamping and some selections. So that was nice for us to actually do some crafting together. But now I'm at the recording stage. She's tucked up in bed watching a murder mystery and I'm going to show you what we've created. Now today's project, I'm going on with a whole lot of stamping again. Now I think the last video I mentioned that I was doing some stamping and that some of you had asked a few months ago for me to do some projects with stamping on. And I've been playing in my fabric stash and looking through my stamp stash, and I've combined them both. So what we're doing today is some mini stamped fabric ephemera, perfect for putting into your junk journals or into your art journals or any journal really, or giving as some happy mail. And it's a bit of a mass make actually, because we pulled a few things together and I made quite a few of them. So you can see here that I have stamped some fabric. I cut out different sized swatches. Now I started with a 2" by 2" template. So you can see here's my 2" template. So it's a Twinchie size actually. And I used my pinking shear scissors and I cut around this template. So it was 2" by 2". Then I have another one that is 1 3/4 inches by 1 3/4 inches. And I cut around some plain fabric for that. And you can see that it is this size. So here we go. Here's our bits of fabric. I have a pattern piece of fabric that is 2" by 2", and I have a plain piece of fabric that is 1 3/4 inches by 1 3/4 inches. And you can see it's cut with a pinking shear. And this is what I stamped on. And I stamped a whole lot of different things, and then I coordinated them and put them onto the fabric. Now you'll also see that some of them I made them slightly bigger. You can see here's my 2" by 2", but I've actually extended the size. So I did them quite a few different ways. I did 5 different types, but I made multiples. So like I said, it's a mass make. So if you want to see how to make them and you want to see all of the examples, stick around for the video and I'll be back in a moment with all of my supplies and we'll start with the stamping. I'll see you soon. Okay, I've just written the measurements on there. So I'm going to start with some stamping and we'll start with the background. So all I did was I pulled out a neutral color, and I think this is Ranger Archival ink and it's Pebble Beach. And I'm using permanent or archival ink, and I'm also using VersaFine. And I'll tell you a few tricks that I had with it, because the VersaFine can smudge initially. So you can see I just stamped a background onto it with a little bit of text. And I'm also using some archival ink for a leaf pattern. So this one is Fired Brick. There we go. And so the stamping's very quick on it. And doing a mass make, you can spread them all out and do multiple passes where you just stamp lots of things all at once. Now I think I want to put like a circle or something on this. So let's pull out Crafty by Tony the collector and we'll do a circle and we'll do a number. Let's do that. Now these were really fun to make. And like I said, I just put them together in different ways so that they looked interesting. I'm going to put that on there. Britain. Oh, now I didn't get that side very well, so let's just do that side again. And I'm just going to put a number on it. So just use some of the stamps you've got. Have a look in your stash and see what you like playing with, and I just picked things that were going to go onto a small format. So there's our stamping. Now what I did next was I actually left these overnight to dry. I didn't attempt to do anything with them at this stage. I left them and I mass stamped, oh, maybe about 20, 25, something like that. And as I said, I left them overnight, but for the sake of the camera, I'll show you where we got to with this. I'm going to now just glue that on. Now this is what I ended up doing. I glued it on to my background. So let's assume it's all dry. The next thing I did was I took it to the sewing machine and I sewed around it. But if you don't have a sewing machine and you've glued it at this stage, then just leave it and it will be fine. You could do a little bit of hand stitching if you wanted to on it, or you could use some fabric glue to glue it together so it's a little bit more stuck. But as I said, I just, at this stage, took it to the machine and put some stitching on it. I didn't stitch around all of them. Sometimes I just did a little bit of stitching, but I'll show you that in a moment. So let's put this one just here, and that can dry, and we'll go on to the next step of showing you what I did with them. In the intro, I said to you that I made them 5 different ways. So the number 1 is a twinchie. The next one, number 2, I made them into tags. So let's have a look at how I turned them into tags. And you can see that I have done that exact one. And I have put a little embellishment onto it. It's just a jump ring embellishment. And I also put a clamp onto it. Now you can see here it's got a tooth on it and it just clamps shut, and it's got a little hole at the top that you can tie something to. So it just goes on, like I said, and clamps shut. You squeeze it shut with some pliers. And I've turned the twinchie into a tag. Now you can see also that I have done some stitching on it around the perimeter, and then I've also just glued on a piece of cardboard onto the back so that it is nice and tidy on the back. And then I've just put some twine on the top of it. So that's a really easy way to make a tag. Now, the next option is that you can just put an eyelet in it. So let's put an eyelet in this one. This one here, you can see that I have used some really heavily textured fabric as the background, and then I've stamped on to the plain background. I stamped on a Tim Holtz stamp, and I used pink, and then I stamped on an All and Create flower and an ampersand, and I've sewn on some little buttons, and this one here I've turned into a tag. So let's just do that with this one. So all I'm doing is putting an eyelet into it, and when you cut holes through fabric, you usually have to cut off a little bit of the fabric because it doesn't cut out perfectly, but that's okay. We'll set that eyelet, and I've just cut a little bit of cardboard out of my stash, 2 inches by 2 inches, to go on the back, just to make the back look a little bit tidier. Not that it needs to be overly tidy. And I've got a little bit of ribbon that I'm just going to tie on with a piece of twine. Let's put twine on this one, and you can see the other one has an ampersand little tile on it, an and symbol. But this one, I think I just want to put some black and white twine onto it. And there we go. There's a few tags out of our twinchie. All right, let's leave those ones there. And I've got some other ones to show you as an example at the end. Now let's have a look at the next one. The next one is a pennant. Now I created these ones, you can see here. This one goes this way and this one goes this way. Now I have made these ones so that I can tie them around something. So it threadles and ties around a page or around a journal. So here we go. I just pulled out a journal. You can see that I've designed it so that it can go around a journal and you can tie it in a bow and it can be like a closure. So you would tie it and this would be able to slide up and down and you position it wherever you wanted to position it, and it could be a ribbon journal closure. Now this one you'll see I've done it, but I've done it the other orientation. So let's put that one together. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to just punch some holes in my top of my fabric, and you can see that this fabric I made it a little bit bigger than 2 inches. And I'll tell you how much bigger it is. It's 2 inches wide by 2.5 inches long. So it's just 1/2 inch bigger. And all I'm going to do is finish decorating it. So I think I'd like to put on a brad. So I'm just going to push a hole with this, with my awl, and put a brad in. Now where do we want the brad first? We've put a brad on it, and now I'm just going to glue on a piece of cardboard, just some scrap cardstock out of my stash, and I'm going to glue that onto the back just to tidy it up a little bit, and it's just slightly smaller. And then we'll push through some eyelets, and I'll just make sure there's no fabric on that. We don't want any fabric getting stuck in the eyelet, and I'll set those. And now all we're going to do is we're just going to run a piece of ribbon through that. So let's try them on this little book that I've got. So if you tie them around, I needed to use much longer ribbon, but they look quite nice as a little pennant tied around. And obviously this one will go vertically. So one horizontally and one vertically. So that's another way of doing it. So using that same stamped element, but then increasing the size so that it can be a pennant. So let's write pennant on there as number 3. Okay, so let's have a little look at the next one. And this one is a little bit different in that I have stamped my 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 patches, but I've then glued it onto a longer piece and made some tabs. Now the length of this one is 5 3/4, and that's so that it will stitch on and then leave us a little bit of meat here on the edge that we can turn it into a tab. Here you can see that I have stitched this, but for some of you, you may not have a sewing machine. So a solution for that is to just use some eyelets. So let's do that. Let's just use some eyelets instead of stitching. And I'm going to put on a little piece of ribbon just to pretty it up a bit. And we'll make this the front this time. So that will go around like that. And I'm going to actually put 2 eyelets in it. Now you can see that I have stitched on my 2 stamped items first and then folded in half. I'm going to just put over a little bit of ribbon. And as I said, you could stitch it just how like I have stitched it here. You can see that underneath there I've stitched it. But it's not necessary if you don't have a sewing machine. So let's start at the top and we'll set an eyelet into it first. Just cut off those little frayed bits. Put an eyelet in. Make sure that it goes all the way through. I probably should use a washer actually. that doesn't always happen. And then we'll cut off the back. So I'll just cut it on a little bit of an angle. And I'm going to put in another eyelet down the bottom because that will set that tab. Now the other thing that I've got is, you can see that on this one I've put some brads in. So I'm just going to put a couple of brads in where I think that they would look good. Okay, so there we go. There's our tab. Now that will go onto a page. Let me show you that on a page in my journal. So we could glue that onto a page just by gluing it there like that, and you can see the tab side stays out, and when you flip it over it's the same on both sides, and you close the journal and the tab sticks out the side, and you could hang a dangle or something off the end of that. So I've got a few examples to show you of that. So let's add to our list number 4, tabs, and we'll leave our tabs there. And then the last one I want to show you is a banner. So you can see here that I have turned this one into a banner. And what I've done is I've made the piece of fabric. I can tell you how long I've made it. I've made it 2 3/4 inches long and 2 inches wide. And then I've folded it over. You can see I've folded it over. And I've run a straight stitch along it so that it creates a channel in the top of it. So let me show you that I can push something through that channel now. There, that slides through, and it's reasonably snug. And I'm going to tie some twine onto that. But before I do, you can just see that I have stamped out on my 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 some stamps. Then I've stitched it onto that piece of fabric that was 2 inches wide by 2 3/4 inches high, and I've stitched on a little piece of ribbon and wrapped it over, and I've just made that channel in it to put the bamboo stick in. Actually, let me show you. I just bought some bamboo skewers and I cut them with a pair of scissors and cut them to size, and I will tie on a little piece of twine so that it becomes a banner. But before I do that, I will just cut down this ribbon so that it's got a fishtail on it. There we go, that looks good. We then can glue on a piece of cardboard onto the back of it. So let's do that. Just a scrap piece of cardstock, just to tidy up the back. You can see that I've also stitched on a little button. And let's get some twine out. And I'll tie on some twine. Now what I also did was I just ran a little bit of glue. I put the stick in about 1/3 of the way, and I just put a little bit of glue onto the stick, and then I pushed it into the channel, twisting it as I did so that it would glue in there and not come out. And now we can put on our twine and just tie the twine on however you want to tie it. No hard and fast rules with how you want to tie it. I'm going to leave a little bit hanging down. There we go. And we've got a little banner out of the same Twinchie. So you can see that by stamping this inset piece, we can use it in lots of different ways. So let me now add that to my list. So we've got our last one. We've got number 5. We've got a banner. Fabulous. All right, I will clear the decks and then I'll bring out all of the other ones that I've made. And like I said, I think I've mass made about 20 or 25 of them. and we'll have a little look at all of the examples. I'll be back in a moment. So here's our mini stamped fabric ephemera. That is a Twinchie size base, and then I've modified it slightly to use it 5 different ways, either as a Twinchie, as a tag, as a pennant, as a tab, or as a banner. So let's have a little look. You can see here that here is our Twinchie, and this one here is a Twinchie as well, but I've left a little bit of a fray onto it. So there's that one. And here's another one, and you can see that I have made a Twinchie, but I've put a piece of ribbon through the middle of it, and I've stamped a bee and just put a brad on it, and on the back it's covered with a piece of cardboard. So nice and quick and easy. And here's one more. So we've got a Twinchie with a ribbon on it through the center, and then a little jump ring embellishment, a stamped center, and it's got cardboard on the back as well. So that's where we started with those. So some of them, as we know, we turned into tags just by putting an eyelet in the top of the Twinchie or putting a clasp on it and a little bit of ribbon. And here's 2 more. And you can see that most of them have got similar stamping on them because I was mass making, and then I've put a button on them or I've put a brad on them just as some decoration. So there's the tags. We made our pennants, so either a horizontal pennant or a vertical pennant. So one that we can tie vertically or one that we can tie horizontally, and the ribbon can just go through it. And it can move across the page or the journal front or something. The next ones we turned into our banners. This one's a little bit bigger actually. I didn't fold it over to the correct Twinchie size, but this one is a Twinchie size. This one's, I haven't done it correctly, but it doesn't matter. That would be a lovely piece of ephemera to put onto the front of a journal actually. And I've just got some scrap card on the back. Now these ones here, so as you can start to see, I mass made the stamping sections and then I just put them on different backgrounds. So we've seen this on this one where I was stamping the 1 3/4 square and just mass stamping them and then letting them dry overnight and creating the background. Then the ones here we've got our tabs, and these ones are all double-sided. We've got this one here, it's got tickets on it. Now I haven't bothered putting something in the middle of this one because that's going to glue onto a page as I showed you, and it's just got a brad on it on either side. So this one here, for example, I put a eyelet in it, but then I've put a little charm on it with a bulb pen, but you can see that it will glue onto a page. Let's have a look at that on a page. So there we go. That looks lovely on the page actually, doesn't it? It looks nice on that page. So that will glue on there, and then when you turn the page over, it'll look nice on the other side as well, and it'll look nice sticking out of the journal. This one here, I've got some dragonflies and just a little brad with it and an eyelet. This one I've actually made it so that the tab is at the top of the page. So let's have a look at that. I've got 2 like that. It will go onto the page like this and stick out the top of the page. And this one, it looks a little bit different. It goes on the corner and it has a tab at the top, and then it's got some little tabs here to hang something on as well. But that looks cute in the journal as well. So there we go. I hope you really liked that mass make today of doing mini stamped fabric ephemera. And we can use that 5 ways. So we can either use it as a Twinchie and do something with it, or we can turn it into tags, pennants, tabs, or banners. So they were fun to make. They were a little bit fiddly, but they were super fun. And I got to use my stamps again. I used lots of stamps I haven't used in a while. And I also used up some fabric scraps, which is great. And then I got to decorate. So a fun little project, a great mass make, and I hope you get inspired to look at your stamps a little bit differently and pull out some of those ones that you don't play with very often. Alright, if you liked the video today, give it a thumbs up, that would be wonderful. And think about subscribing to the channel if you're not subscribed. And let me know in the comments which is your favourite alteration of the Twinchie base. That would be great to hear from you about that. Okay, thanks again for watching. I really appreciate you tuning in, and thank you to all my lovely regulars for your likes and your comments and hypes. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all again very soon with another project. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.